Okay, we're jumping right into a huge, fast-moving story coming out of the Middle East. It's a major international event, and the implications are massive. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what we know, what happened, why it happened, and what could possibly come next.
So, picture this. In the dead of night, while most of us were sleeping, a conflict that's been simmering for decades just exploded into open war. We're talking about explosions rocking multiple cities all across Iran. And just like that, a new, incredibly uncertain chapter begins for the whole region. And then came the official word, directly from the US president. I mean, no ambiguity, no room for speculation. This was it. The confirmation of a massive, coordinated military campaign. And with that single sentence, you can just imagine the diplomatic talks that were happening just days ago. Well, they were completely thrown out the window.
All right, so let's get into the specifics. What exactly happened on the ground? How did this all kick off?
You know, the really critical thing to understand here is the sheer scale of this thing. This was not some small, limited strike. No, this was a joint US and Israeli operation. We're talking about massive strikes on dozens of targets. So while you have smoke rising over Tehran, you've got air raid sirens sending millions of Israelis into bomb shelters. And the timing? Wow, the timing is just key. This all went down barely 24 hours after the latest round of nuclear negotiations had wrapped up, which caught a lot of people completely off guard.
So that leads to the big question, right? What was the official reason for such a huge escalation? Why now? I mean, especially when it looked like diplomatic talks were still on the table.
Well, the heart of the official justification really boils down to these two words: imminent threat. It's a phrase you hear a lot in these situations, and it's used to justify acting first. The argument being that if you wait, the damage will be much, much worse. And that is precisely how the term was used here. The president framed the entire mission as a protective one, to eliminate threats and defend American interests and allies. He put it in the larger context of what he called the regime's 47-year unending campaign of bloodshed.
So, according to US officials, this was basically a last resort. The argument is that real, honest negotiations just weren't working, that they had failed to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. And while all this diplomacy was happening out in the open, behind the scenes, a massive military buildup was taking place. It seems that leverage was, in the end, put to use.
Of course, retaliation from Iran was never a matter of if, but when. And it came, all right? It came fast, and it targeted multiple countries all across the region.
And the retaliation was almost a textbook tit for tat. In response to the strikes on their homeland, Iran immediately lashed out. They launched dozens of ballistic missiles aimed at Israel, and at the same time they targeted US military bases and allies all across the Gulf. We're talking Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, you name it.
So the big question then becomes, how effective was that retaliation? Well, from the initial reports we're seeing, it looks like the defensive systems held up surprisingly well. Israel's famous Iron Dome system intercepted a bunch of incoming missiles. Qatar shot down at least 2. The US even reported 0 casualties at its base in Bahrain. So it seems that first wave had, as sources are putting it, a very limited impact.
But here's where the story takes a major turn. Beyond just hitting military targets or nuclear sites, leaders in the US and Israel started talking about a much bigger, and honestly, a far more ambitious goal.
The whole conversation started to shift, and pretty quickly. It stopped being just about neutralizing immediate threats and started being about something much more fundamental: the future of Iran itself.
And that's where we get to this term, the big one, regime change. The explicit goal of replacing the current government. That's a goal that, officials had often been pretty careful not to state so directly in the past. I mean, this is a pretty stunning statement. It's not a subtle hint. This is a direct message to the Iranian people, basically calling on them to seize this moment and overthrow their own leaders. He's presenting the military strikes as a window of opportunity for an internal uprising. And that's a sentiment we heard echoed by the Israeli Prime Minister as well.
So the way this whole operation is being framed is really interesting. It's not being called an invasion. Instead, it's being presented as a form of support. Some analysts are pointing to those recent large-scale protests inside Iran and basically framing this military action as the outside help that they say Iranian citizens were already asking for. Yeah, as you can probably imagine, the global reaction to all of this has been anything but unified. In fact, you're seeing two completely different, starkly opposed interpretations of what's happening. So on one side, you have this view that the military action is a historic moment of liberation. It's being seen as a legacy of peace through strength and maybe just maybe, the beginning of a much better future for the Iranian people, a future free from their government. But then, you have the complete opposite take. This perspective sees the whole thing as a huge betrayal of diplomacy. Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev, he just came out and called the talks a deception. He's claiming they were just a cover story, a way for the US to secretly get ready for a war they had already planned. I mean, it's a totally different reading of the exact same events. And make no mistake, this is not over, not by a long shot. US officials are being crystal clear on this point. This is not a quick in-and-out operation. Both American and Israeli sources are talking about these strikes lasting for days, and some analysts are predicting it could go on for even longer than that.
So that's where we stand right now. This is just the beginning. As the fighting continues, and as these larger goals are pursued, the long-term consequences for millions of people and for the very balance of power in the